Hello and welcome to another episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. My name is Adam and I'm joined by Liz. And Liz, I just need to check. Are you okay?
I'm really good. Why?
Well, I'm worried because each week when we talk about an oil, something seems to happen to you so you can learn about this oil. And what we're going to talk about with Helichrysum being such an amazing healer, I was worried for you all week. I've been praying and talking to
Well, do you know
everyone
what?
out there.
I did my helichrysum work, 6 years ago?
Oh, good.
There was deep helichrysum work 6 years ago when I wrote the book. No, I'm all right. Thank you for the concern.
I can breathe easy. I can breathe easy. I'm very excited to talk about this oil. Obviously, you have a strong passion with it. It's an oil that, of course, is gifted to us from this beautiful yellow flower, sometimes called Helichrysum. Other people call it Immortelle. Other people call it the Everlasting. And one of the cool things about it is when you pick it, it never dies. It just kind of dries as though it's still fresh, doesn't it?
Exactly right. And it just so happens I have concealed about my person I call it helichrysum rather than helichrysum. But you can see there's like two, so there's like nice fresh ones, and these have gone over. And actually, and here was the learning. You see, you asked the wrong question. So over the weekend, I went to the Ashmolean Museum, and we saw these beautiful mummies. We went to see the Minoans actually, but we went wandering around, and we saw these beautiful mummies from Hawara, which are Roman mummies. Around about 200 AD, so around about 1800 years old, and there was one particular one. So the Hawara Roman mummies are spectacular because they're so intricately bandaged very carefully, and this one had a golden mask and also a helichrysum crown.
Wow.
You could still see it 2,000 years ago. That's what it looked like. I mean, that's a week over, and that is exactly what it looked like. So that's why they call it everlasting flower.
Now, not only is the flower amazing, but the essential oil is, I think, something that a lot of people maybe aren't as familiar with this oil, but I think it's definitely one to have in your first aid cabinet or as part of your artillery, because it definitely comes in handy, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And myself, it was never really an oil that I was that invested in, to be honest. But I was at Botanica, which is a big exhibition. Do you know, I don't know, 2016 maybe, and opposite me there was a lady selling wild harvested helichrysum oils. And I'll never forget how beautiful her stand was. She got these fantastic yellow flowers, and all her labels were sort of that yellow against brown bottles. And the lady's father-in-law had made these beautiful deep blue earthenware pots to go with it. And it was just the most beautiful. And she just had crowds and crowds and crowds of people around all of the time. And I was just like, don't get it. It's not one of my oils. But the oil came to find me that week. Somebody in our family, one of my daughter's very close friends, had a horrific car accident and went into a coma. And so we were very much involved in wounds that would not heal, and this oil. And so actually this is one of the reasons why I didn't pick up the oil this week, because I didn't want to go back to that place. It's very strong scent association with very unhappy times for me with helichrysum. So I do use it, but I don't, it's not an oil I get out for the sake of it. But yeah, any kind of trauma, physical or emotional trauma, specifically like if you cut your leg, you cut yourself really badly, or burn yourself very badly, or really deep, breakages of the bones even. The Greeks talked about how it would knit the bones. Very important oil.
Well, I'd love to share three different experiences I've had with Helichrysum, then maybe you could elaborate on how many uses it has. But first of all, one of the nicknames we have it for is liquid stitches. So I will often keep it in the bathroom. So if I happen to cut myself shaving, popping it on, and you just notice it just seems to stem the flow of blood really, really quickly. So it's a great first aid one in that kind of way. Now, once I remember, this is many years ago now, probably about 6 or 7, but I was rushing around the house like a chicken with its head cut off kind of thing. Very crazy, running late for something, and bang, foot on the metal leg of a coffee table. I'm like, ooh, that's going to bruise. So I knew, oh, hold on, Helichrysum's good for that. I grabbed it, threw a little bit on there, put my shoes and socks on, and off I went for the day and ran around madly. That night, when I was taking my sock off, where the oil had landed, the skin was nice and its normal pinkish color. But where the oil actually had landed had turned black and blue. And that kind of was really my first eye-opening experience of how amazing helichrysum could actually be. Now, where I really fell in love with it was a few years ago. Forgive me for getting graphic for a second, but I had orthodontic surgery and I actually had my upper jaw cut in half. So they actually severed it in half. They're, hopefully no one's eating their dinner at the moment. And then they had to open it up to make more room for all my teeth to straighten them up. So those that have been watching my YouTube channel have seen the journey of my teeth throughout the last few years. But it was helichrysum, frankincense, and copaiba that we've already talked about copaiba in one of our other episodes. Those three oils combined together, I was using them as soon as I was kind of conscious after being under general anesthetic. I was using all those three oils throughout my mouth. And when I went back for the checkup, well, first of all, I checked out of hospital 24 hours later and didn't need any serious pain medication, which I was rapt about. And 2 weeks later, I remember going back to the surgeon for that checkup to make sure everything's healing properly. And he has a look and he kind of nods and then goes back to his paperwork and he looks really confused. And he's like, when was your surgery again? And I was like, 2 weeks ago. He's like, 2 or 4? 2 it was. And he's like, oh, okay, you're healing really, really well, but really, really quickly. It looks like about 4 weeks worth of healing. And that I attribute mainly to the helichrysum being there as well. So it's an amazing oil for anyone from a scratch when you're shaving to to some kind of post-surgery healing as well.
That's an amazing story. I did have an accident, but not recently. It was when I was writing the book, actually, and we had recently moved into this house and was walking across the patio, but that's very loosely termed. There was a broken slab, and it was over an open drain. And my foot went down, and the slab came back and trapped my leg, and screaming terribly, help me. And of course the silent one went, all right, as if I was making this enormous fuss over nothing. And he just went, oh my goodness, look at the state of that. And it had been clamped between the two broken slabs, and it was a really bad cuts, bruises all over. And as you quite rightly say, days is all it took to heal with the helichrysum. And also, I had another situation with a burn. Jeannie Rose always talks about how she uses helichrysum essential oil with rosehip carrier oil for a burn. And I have to say, I was a bit like, oh, I'm not sure about that, because I always imagine that if you get that heat from a burn, that the oils are going to fry on your skin. And I still think that, actually. But she was right. It took the sting out so quickly, and really healed it over very, very quickly. And of course, no scar tissue is the incredible thing that you see. But I mean, what's interesting is almost like a contradiction in terms, as you quite rightly say. It is called liquid stitches, and it does stop bleeding very quickly when you've hurt yourself. But actually, the action of helichrysum essential oil is that it thins the blood. And that makes no sense that it does it, but it does. Yeah.
Yeah. How about, apart from, if we actually got open cuts and wounds, is there any other time that you would kind of reach for helichrysum?
Yeah, a lot. So any kind of... So actually, it's interesting that when I was writing a book, I kind of kept giggling away to myself, thinking about these guys in sort of the 1990s that the drug companies sent out to see, like, the local healers to learn about the plant botany. And I thought it was like the poor guy that was sent to learn about helichrysum was just stitched up well and truly, because the chemistry changes not just like country to country or even like village to village, but also in the sun or in the shade. I mean, it is just the most incredible plant for changing for what's going on around it. And there are around about 600 different species of helichrysum. Not all of them make oil, obviously. It's Helichrysum italicum that we use. But if you really want to get good skin healing, and so, for example, what's the name of the company? It's gone out of my head. L'Occitane. L'Occitane do an everlasting skin cream, like with a moisturizer. The best possible skin healing ones. If you go sort of head over to Corsica, Sardinia, all of those kinds of areas, they're much higher in nerol acetate. Whereas if you head over more to sort of Croatia, Slovenia, also fantastic oils, but much lower in helichrysum, in nerol acetate, and better for immunity, boosting immunity. So it's a very sort of flexible oil, but I use it a lot for people who have eczema, dermatitis, that kind of, well, just skin healing. But also if somebody has varicose veins, varicose eczema, because it thins the blood and it heals the skin. Lovely for old people's oils, legs and skin, full stop, really. Yeah.
I know, especially when being an eczema sufferer in the past, sometimes it gets so itchy that you just, scratch it to the point where blood is, you cut, or it's almost that. Helichrysum is amazing at that point as well to help speed up that healing as well, because it can really go on. But it does have a reputation, like you said, for being a beauty essential oil, and it helps women to remain immortal in their appearance, because it just keeps them looking young, and that's why it is such a popular one in some really great skincare products as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when I first started researching the oils, as I say, it wasn't, I knew about it, I'd learned about it in my diploma, but I'd just gone, yeah, whatever, not really gone there at all. And I was fascinated by the fact that, I think it was Kurt Schnellbelt had said, it was very odd that this oil had appeared from nowhere in the 1980s. There was nothing in history written about it. There was no old documentation to fall back on. And then Jade Schutz sort of said, yes, I found that as well. And then that became law, that it wasn't written. So, of course, that is the kind of thought process that really engages me. I was like, that can't be right. And so I spent a long time looking for it, and it had changed its name. So it used to be called the Amaranth, and Dioscorides talked about it as Helichrysum. And he talked about how there were two Helichrysons. So there was the yellow one, but also a purple one, which is the other amaranth, which is grain amaranth that people still eat. And he talked a lot about how it was very good for wounds, and on the battlefields, how that they would use it for healing. And also there's another sort of strain of Helichrysum sanguineum. So this is Italicum sanguineum, is like a red oil, almost like sea buckthorn oil looks, how it like shimmers. And there's quite a lot of documentary evidence of how the warriors were covered in this oil before they went. You can imagine they must have like shone bronze in the sunshine, but also this incredible fortifying energy of this oil, both fortifying to the body but also to the spirit. So yeah, very interesting to look at it from the point of view of Artemis is like the goddess of natural healing, of herbal medicines. So for it to be her sacred plant really is quite a testimony really to it.
Is this one of the when it comes to Artemis, is this one of her principal plants that are sacred to her, or there's a strong connections to that?
The amaranth is her sacred flower, yeah. And so when warriors died, if the heroes died, and they were given crowns in the tombs, hence that's what we saw in the museum. But actually what was really interesting was I'd found that they made wreaths and crowns for the gods out of it as well. And so when my youngest Dexter had to do they had a special sort of like costume days, and he had to do an ancient Greek day, and Dexter being Dexter went, oh, what should I be? I'll be Poseidon. And I was like, pick something easy then, why don't you? So I made this fantastic, because I am very good at costumes, I have to say, fantastic sort of waves. It was all turquoise and shimmery, and he had this fantastic crown with all loads and loads of shells on it. And I put the the amaranth around the base of it. And for literally years, it filled the smell of my shed. And to the end, I went, Dex, I've got to throw it away. I can't stand it anymore. But nothing smells as strong as it.
Mm. And I must admit, we normally do talk about essential oils very early. And one of the things about aromatherapy is the aroma. Helichrysum's not really going to win the award for best smelling essential oil, nor really the one that really stands out. It's not really a memorable one. It's kind of, it outperforms others in its healing abilities, but not in its smell. Would you agree?
I do agree. And actually, do you have this plant in Australia?
No, I've never actually seen it in person.
We call it curry plant. When it's growing, it's when you walk past it and it gets enormous. It's enormous in my garden, and I have to say, Daryl just goes, "When are we cutting this down?" Because it smells like turmeric or curry as you walk past it.
Yeah,
but it's not quite as, it's a bit more earthy and floral when the essential oil is made. But as you say, it's not one you're going to go, it's gorgeous. But it just blends really nicely with lots of things.
Very much so. Now, I think also helichrysum is a classic example of what an oil does physically. It does emotionally and spiritually as well. And this is definitely one that will help with healing of wounds on the physical, but on the emotional as well. Would you agree?
Entirely. And my book is called For the Wound That Will Not Heal.
Yeah. So I wanted to share a little story about somewhere in astrology, and this is why I chose to speak about helichrysum this week. It's about the origin story of a Greek mythological figure by the name of Chiron. Now, Chiron, basically, his father, I believe it was Cronus, I may be wrong, but Cronus basically fell in love with a little nymph called, he became infatuated with a little nymph called Philandra and decided, I want a bit of that. So he tried to woo her, but she wasn't interested in him as well at all. So, he tried and tried and tried. She kept on saying no. Eventually, she kept running away. So he turned himself into a stallion, chased her down, had his way with her, and then was done and went off to his next conquest. Now, from that interaction, Philandra actually became pregnant. And when she gave birth to Chiron, she wasn't interested in him because basically she was a result of rape. So poor old Chiron was abandoned. Now, because his father was a stallion, he was born as a centaur, with the legs and the body of a horse and then that upper torso and the head of the man. So poor old Chiron had a pretty rough start to life. No one wanted him. He was pretty, a bit of an outcast, and he could have just kind of become a bit of a ruffian and made nothing of his life. But he didn't allow that to happen. He actually was taken under the wing of the god Apollo, where he learned to become a great healer, a great musician, a great warrior, and ended up becoming a great teacher and taught some of our most famous mythological figures such as Jason and Achilles. Now, in astrology, Chiron is this astrological body that, where it is placed in your birth chart, represents a wound that happens to you when you're young, somewhere. And it may be, if it's in Aries, it may be that you're insignificant. If it's in Gemini, that no one can understand you. If it's in Capricorn, that you're a failure. And this is something that will keep on coming up throughout your life, especially when Chiron goes into retrograde, and Chiron goes into retrograde this year on the 23rd of July. What I love about it is helichrysum is a really great one at helping to heal those long-lasting wounds. And like you said in your book, it's that wound that will not heal. Because the great thing is we can either take those things that happened to us in the past and they can be our for want of a better term, our Achilles heel, or they can actually drive us to be rather quite successful. So we find those that feel misunderstood, that have Chiron and Gemini, are often quite successful performers and artists. For me, my Chiron is in Taurus, which is the house of money and financial well-being. And I know that whenever things are going wrong, I'm always worrying about money. But I've also developed the ability to find money and earn money. And as a clairvoyant once said to me, Adam, you worry about money so much, but you have far more than the average person does a lot of the time as well. And so this is where your Chiron can be this wound that will trip you up, but can actually become your greatest strength as well. And helichrysum can be a really beautiful oil at helping you to heal that wound. In our masterclass that we'll talk about at the end, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper so we can look at whatever everyone's Chiron wound is. You can get an understanding of that and how that's your superpower as well. But helichrysum, along with two other oils that we'll talk about in our masterclass, are really great at helping to not totally heal, because that wound will never heal, but allow you to turn that wound into a strength rather than a weakness.
Have you read my book?
I haven't. No.
That's exactly almost word for word 2 chapters of my book.
Oh wow! I've got your Tulsi book. I've got your Rose book. I've got a few, but I don't have your Healing Crisis one.
Yeah.
There we go.
So I do indeed say that call it Chiron's its ruler rather than sun. I even break down the different houses exactly like that. That's very interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. But actually, so I'll take this wound that will not heal a bit deeper. So there are many people who are born with situations that will not heal. So, for example, imagine that you're a twin. You cannot be separated from the way that people think about your twin. Or you may be or adopted, you know, and the wounds that leaves behind. So these are like very deep psychological wounds. But also we talk about the gold that comes from it. So thinking about, for example, someone who, the most awful thing, I have a friend who was born, who gave birth to a stillborn child. There would be no coming back from that, in my opinion, and yet she is the most incredible teacher of people who have just, you know, had the same thing happen to them. She's able to talk to them in a way that regardless of how empathic I am or how much I research around the subject, I can't speak to that wound, and yet she does it so well. And helichrysum is very good at being able to get you through the worst, the darkest area, to be able to find that gold. And of course, there is the gold. You know, that's what you're looking for, the spiritual gold in the lesson. And I think it's a really, really important oil. And I always think it's really fascinating that you can learn about an essential oil at the very topmost level. And maybe just like one word, but then you can study for years and years and years and years and years, like I do, and drill down and still go, do you know what? Everything I know about that oil was still summed up by that one word. And helichrysum in my diploma course was described as fortifying. And I can't improve on that description, no matter how much I know.
One, I love the analogy that you bring in as well, as obviously with the golden flower. It definitely has a golden light or a golden ray to it. And then there's the Japanese tradition, which we talk about in our book, Gifts of Essential Oils, called kitsugi, which is when a bowl or something breaks, putting it back together but using gold and making it more beautiful because it is broken. And I think it's, you know, we all have things that happen into our lives that break us and we shatter apart. But it's how we knit ourselves together that actually makes the person who we are today, and that makes us interesting.
Exactly right.
Yeah. In astrology, you know, we have different planetary positions, and some are favorable and some are unfavorable. And they're often represented by blue and red lines if you pull up a birth chart. And I always explain that you don't want to ever have all just blue favorable lines, because that's almost like being a trust fund child, where everything happens easily and you just don't grow. It's through those experiences that we learn. It's through those that adversity that we face and those challenges. That's who we become, who we are. And that's who makes us the golden person we are.
Yeah, and I do think, what was interesting actually, when you were talking about the origination of Chiron, yes, he was taught by Apollo, but he was taught by Apollo's sister. Artemis taught him about the healing. And of course, she's the goddess of the wilderness. You know, these are the wild edges, the raw edges that we learn. She's about going off in a solitary nature. She wanted to be on her own, and these are all sort of teachings of helichrysum about how this is your own personal journey, that this comes from your own time in the forest, in the wilderness. And it's not something that I would welcome wanting to do. You know, these are you do these things at times of challenges, don't you? You go off and you do the spirit walk because everything else is going wrong. And in those kind of situations, that's when I pick the oil up. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's one that we don't go looking for lessons of helichrysum, but lessons of helichrysum will probably come to us at some point in our lives,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I mean, yeah. So what's interesting actually is I have a meeting coming up in the next few weeks with quite a famous actress, and I was thinking about, you think about what will we talk about, and I was thinking about how you can take your mind into a positive sort of arena with an essential oil. This actress is quite well known for playing very, very dark characters, and I was thinking, well, are there oils that take your brain into a negative state? And of course there must be, but we don't actively look for them, do we? But I do think that helichrysum is one of those dark spaces. It's not a happy, joyful thing. It's like, well, it does smell like the tomb. That's what they were. It does. It's almost like there's an ancestral linkage of memory that, it does smell like a tomb. It's musty and dusty and old and damp, that's what it smells like.
Very much, yeah. Now, we sometimes, I love to talk about crystals as well, and there is a particular crystal that I love to kind of pair with helichrysum. I'll hold it up on screen. Hopefully you can see it. It's called ibis jasper. So what happens, you'll see it's got all the different kind of colors in it, and it's a form of brachiated jasper, which means that as it was growing, it broke apart, then reknitted together, and broke apart and reknitted together. And why it's called ibis jasper is because if you've seen, there's many ibises and often they're black and white, but if you look at the Madagascan ibis, where this stone is actually found, it's actually these kind of brown colors. Now, ibis, of course, is the bird associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom. And it's a bird that looks into the water and looks over the emotional realm. And so this is a really great crystal at helping us to see those things that have happened to us in the past that have troubled us, have wounded us in one way or another, but take the lesson and let go of the pain. And so this is a beautiful one to pair up with the helichrysum, and a really nice amulet just to hold whenever you're going through any of those healing issues. And you'll notice one of the primary colors is orange. So it works really well at sacral chakra, where a lot of wounds about intimacy and intimate relationships and people we're close to can happen as well. So it's a lovely one to pair when you're working with helichrysum.
Yeah, on the note of chakras, I mean, it is yellow, of course, that's solar plexus, but also it's extremely supportive to the liver, to the digestive system. I think it's Battaglia talks about how it's cleansing of all the chelates that get stuck within the liver, the pancreas, the kidneys, all of that sort of excretory system. But when we think about excretory in Chinese medicine, we think about metal, don't we? And metal is this color. So it has that metal energy as well. So the breathing in the fresh stuff, letting go of the old stuff. Yeah.
Now I think a couple of other things, its wounding healing aspect is kind of the primary thing that we think of with helichrysum, that fortifying aspect, but also leaning into that immortality aspect as well. It is an oil that can be used for connecting, for mediumship, for connecting with ancestors, and that kind of, it kind of has that ancient energy about it, doesn't it? For really helping you to kind of remember the lineage that you've come from, and even, doing any generational healing and looking at the lessons we get from the past can be facilitated through helichrysum as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but I mean, like I say, it does smell like the tomb to me. So I'm sure if you did want to focus on that sort of ancient lineage, that's clever. I wouldn't have thought of doing that, but yes.
Yeah, other things as well. Try popping it on the soles of your feet. Some people found it really helps with a bit more vivid or lucid dreaming as well. And in magical work, a lot of the time, we make goals and we might go, oh, I want this to happen or I want this to happen. But if you've got a goal or an intention that you want to be long lasting, and you're making a bit of an oil blend or a bit of a magical mix to it, you want to have your helichrysum in there if you want it for that kind of eternal or a long, if it's a long-term goal or something you want to stick around for a while. If you want a job, maybe not, because we might want to evolve from that job as time goes on. But if you're looking for maybe a long-lasting love, then helichrysum is a really great one to add into those magical mixes as well.
Yeah, and perfume, because of that longevity. It's not quite a base note; it's middle to base note, but it acts almost like a fixative because it just goes on forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. So in summary, I normally associate with the solar plexus chakra. You're kind of solar plexus and down. Is that right for you?
Yes. Oh, in fact, only solar plexus really for me.
Okay. Yep. And astrologically, do you lean into Chiron as well?
Absolutely. Definitely
yes.
Chiron. But also sun. But also the sun.
Yeah. And remember that also Artemis, there is an actual asteroid called Artemis. I have a real affinity with Artemis. It's interesting always to see where she is in your birth chart. She's actually right next to my sun. So she kind of is illuminated, and it's quite interesting. I was attracted to the goddess before I realized where she was placed in my birth chart. So you can actually look up the asteroid and find out where it's placed compared to you.
Can you remember where a Chiron is in my birth chart?
Not off the top of my head. Do you know?
Smack on the ascendant.
On the ascendant.
Yeah, that's where the healer comes in, isn't it?
It definitely does. It definitely does. So yes. So we're going to dive into it. Obviously, we're going to look at lavender. We're going to look at mandarin. We're going to look at helichrysum, and our topic for next week, Peru balsam. We've got a masterclass happening where people get to hang out with us for a couple of hours, ask their questions. I'll quickly pull up charts if we need to and talk about Chiron and different things like that as well. You've got some great recipes that we're going to share with people as well. That's all happening in a couple of weeks. Oh, next week, actually. We've got 10 days away.
10 days, yeah.
Yep, the 27th of July. It's at 7 p.m. London time, isn't it?
Yes, 7 p.m. UK, yeah.
Yep. Now, if that doesn't work for those that are maybe in Australia or North America, still grab your spot. Email through your questions, and you're going to get the replay, and you've got lifetime access to that. So anyone who registers, whether you attend live or not, you're going to get all that knowledge as well, and you're going to get all your questions answered. As I said, we'll get into Chiron, we'll get into a whole range of other things. We'll do some moon work with mandarin like we talked about last week as well. So why are you excited about the masterclass, Liz?
I just like hearing people's feedback. I do. The thing I enjoy about yours and my sessions is that I'm learning from you all of the time, and the bounce backwards and forth. So I really like doing videos, but I prefer to have somebody to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I don't know, maybe that's unusual, because I think people maybe sometimes go, well, no, don't tell me what to think. Well, I do want to know what you think, So I really enjoy that. But I've spent an awful lot of time over the past few weeks researching Peru balsam for various different ways. So we'll talk a bit about it next week, but I really want to talk more deeply about the sort of sacredness of Peru balsam in the masterclass, and of course all the neurotransmission of lavender, because I think everybody always says, I love to hear about lavender, but I don't hear people actually talking about scientifically what they know it does. So I'm looking forward to teaching that too.
Yeah, well, Peru balsam, I must admit, that's what we're going to cover next week in our episode. I have it. I don't use it a lot, so I've got a week of homework ahead of me to kind of really rebuild that connection with it and find out, why it's such a great oil, and we'll dive into that next week.
So, well, before we do though, let me warn you. So your favorite thing is to put the oil on the bottom of your feet. If you do that and you stand on the surface of your shower, you're going to stain the shower. So don't do it. Okay. Honestly, I ruined the enamel of my bath with Peru balsam, so this always comes as my disclaimer. Don't put it onto a surface; it goes right the way in and stains.
But I'm sure, apart from staining things, it's got some other great attributes to it as well.
It's fantastic oil, yeah.
Yep, and we'll dive into that next week. So until then, take care of yourselves, and now that you're interested in helichrysum, we don't wish any harm to any of you. May you stay safe. But keep helichrysum nearby just in case. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.